Is it the Seventh Seal? I can't tell.
Hang on, which version of the Five Doctors did you watch?
It's black with a chessboard.
I've been time scooped.
Is it the Seventh Seal?
Oh, I see what it is.
Do you see what it is? It's
Yeah.
difficult to see without. Hang on, let's turn the background off. There we go.
There you go. You're a big triangle.
You're caught in the time thing that takes
I'm
them
caught in
away.
the time scoop.
Oh, I thought it was Thingy from Dalek's Master Plan. Hello and welcome to Talking About. This is either part 4 of season 20 or it's take 2 on the Five Doctors, whichever way you want to look at it. I am Paul or P-Bal, and you can like, subscribe, and share as much as you like. And I am joined by...
Hello, it's James.
And hello, it's Jason.
And hello, it's Ben.
Oh, Ben!
Hey, Ben's back.
Thank you.
So you can tell it's a special, can't you?
Yay, and it feels all specially.
Well, season 20 was all about getting back, previous people. So we got Ben back for the last part.
Yay!
Hey, I think he's considerably more exciting than season 20, though.
He hasn't had a redesign, though. I mean, everything that came back in season 20 had a redesign.
I'm
Oh,
not
see,
special.
now, I think you could have cosplayed the bird creature, the bird man.
Oh, the mutant chicken.
Aye, the chicken man, that's the one, aye.
Mm,
What? Why would he dress up like an Ergon?
Yeah.
But that could be quite good.
I mean, you dress up like an Ergon, Clifford. Where's your effort?
I'll tell you, I've got Rusty. I just rely on Old Faithful here. He looks after me very well.
I've got my finger in Rassilon's ring. Lee said, soon as mended there. So we have, as we've just said, come to the end of season 20, which we've all thoroughly enjoyed. Are you a fan of season 20, Ben?
It's all right. It's all right. It's unfortunately, I think it's Davison's weakest season. And it's got a couple of good bits in it, but generally it drags, and the stories are quite average, and I'm pretty sure I think it's Davison's least favorite as well, actually. So yeah, it's not the best, I'm afraid.
We actually rated Terminus our lowest score to date. We all gave it 1 point. That was then followed by The King's Demons, which also got 1 point from all of us. Are you a fan of either of those stories?
No. I think Terminus starts out okay with an interesting premise right at the very beginning, but then it just goes down and down and down, and isn't a very good end for Nyssa. I mean, I think it's quite. I don't know, when Nyssa goes, it's sort of quite sad. I remember sort of being quite sad that the music and the editing, that sort of thing they did when Nyssa goes, and you think, oh, you feel a bit sad for her. But to leave in such a very poor, dire story was a bit of a letdown, I think, for her. And as for King's Demons, I just think that's really it's definitely the least favorite of the two-parters that they ever did, and they did 3 in his series, didn't they? So in Davison's series, so yeah, it's very poor.
So, having had compounded the positivity that we spread on season 20, we're now on to the Five Doctors. Ooh, exciting times. Which I was going to say I'm missing my plastic Mac this time. But Jason, you could have got it off the husband.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed, I could have. And I didn't, because I am actually not sure where it is anymore.
What, your husband?
No, the Mac. I mean, you would expect me to know where these things are, but I don't know where these things are.
I honestly thought you'd be wearing it tonight.
No, there's no
Your
way. No, I thought...
opportunity.
No. I don't do cosplay. You know well enough.
I think there's a story there about what's happened to the Mac, and we don't want to delve too deep.
We'll move it fast on, I feel, here at this stage.
So who wants to start as the Doctor Who and the Five Doctors?
Before we start, I am a little disappointed. I can't see a hardback there at all, and I was expecting to see one to get us going.
Wait for it. Wait for it.
This is a hardback of Shooting the Pilot by Marks and Graham, which is available on our website. Is that the sort of hardback you were looking for? I've got lots of Phantom hardbacks here, all available from www.phantompublishing.co.uk if you should like to purchase. The wee man.
Well, possibly no. Have you not got your W.H. Allen hardback there?
Do you know what? My friend used to have Doctor Who and the Five Doctors. My friend used to play when I was little. Well, when I was younger. I was born 6 foot. When I was younger, my friend of the road had a hardback copy that I borrowed to read, and I foolishly gave it him back. That'd be worth a lot of money if I'd just kept it. Don't steal, kids. It's not right. Anyway, I don't have a hardback of the Five Doctors. Does Jason have a pre-scripted intro that he's taken from the back of the paperback?
I don't actually this time. I'll tell you where my intro comes from for this is, honestly, after season 20, this is like an absolute ray of sunshine to come to what I think essentially should have been the way that we celebrated the 20th anniversary of the program, and not to actually try and shoehorn in all those really random and odd elements I think that they did try and bring in, aside from the bland Omega and the Brigadier twice. This is a glorious piece of television to celebrate the 20th anniversary of Doctor Who, and it's like a nice ray of sunshine. It's got so many lovely, nice bits in it. And actually, it's been really interesting going back and reappraising it. And we've already done this once already. We've already reviewed it once. But coming back to it after season 20 and actually sitting it where it should have sat, actually, this is, for me, a big step up, big improvement. And hey, it's got everything we'd all want. It's got Daleks, it's got the Yeti, it's got the Cybermen, it's got the Master. It hasn't got any Quarks, though. I'm just saying.
No, let's yes.
But it's got something for
don't
everybody.
start the Quark thing, because the Quark thing's like, on Wikipedia when it says citation needed because someone has just put some crazy rubbish out there. That is the Quarks and Five Doctors situation.
See, I found it on, but I think it's been added since we realised it was Quarks right back when we first talked about it. So I think somebody's added it in there.
Found it where?
Utopia, I sent you a link that said this is where I got this information from. So it wasn't just plucked out of midair.
It's not plucked out of any BBC documentation or any memories of anyone who worked on it, though, is it?
No, it is hearsay.
No, it's heresy. It's a completely different thing. Season 20 was a mess, and you could see what JNT was trying to sort of tie in with all the past and, give a little bit of service to some of the things that had come beforehand. But it just really fell flat and didn't work. And then you have the Five Doctors, and a lot of, because we reviewed this before, I was looking more behind the scenes and what was happening and how it came to be. And obviously they got Robert Holmes in to write the first sort of story, which was going to be called The Six Doctors, which was going to have a robot version of Hartnell that was going to be revealed at the end. That got rejected. Then there was a second story where the Doctor was going to go back through his regenerations. And then that was rejected. And then Robert Holmes left because he was just like, well, I've tried to give you what you want, but, I can't do what you've asked me to do. And then it sort of fell to Terence Dicks and Eric Seward, and other people were asked and got annoyed because it was very short notice. So behind the scenes, it was very chaotic. And I guess at this point, part of it comes down to just the sheer want to celebrate the 20th, to try and get as many elements in as possible. And I think some of the elements
they're lucky it worked, because we know from season 20 that it didn't always work to bring someone back from the past. But here, yes, there were changes made last minute, and obviously Tom not being in it changed things, and I think there could have been a better dynamic with some of the companions if Tom had been in it. But what they end up with is something presented, I feel, with genuine love for the show. And I think after watching season 20, it almost feels like a completely different show, and one that is like comfort food. I think I described it last time. It is like comfort food. You can just devour it.
I mean, it's like when they bring, it's almost like, we had the Brigadier back in season 20, and the story itself was just all a bit convoluted and a bit difficult to follow. And we won't go out there with unit dating again, because we said we wouldn't the first time around, and I'll not mention it this time. But in the couple of minutes we get that introduce the Brigadier's character back into the Five Doctors, it's so much better than the whole of the episodes of Mordrin Undead. I mean, it's done really nicely. It's done with affection. Pat and him work really well together. So, I'd rather have just had him in the Five Doctors, I'd had Nick in the Five Doctors, and not have actually had to have sat through sort of Mordrin Undead as we came through season 20.
Well, the Brigadier is retiring, isn't he, in Doctor Who and the Five Doctors? But he knows who Tegan is because he's met her in Mordrin Undead 6 years after he's had his memory loss from when he was working as a teacher.
Oh, don't take us down that path.
I think he's trying desperately to forget it even happened, if I'm honest with you, a bit like we are.
Lee said soon as mended, I think, on that front. I mean, especially so close to what they've just broadcast. You'd have thought someone in the office would have gone, hang on, if he's retiring, he wouldn't. Oh, anyway, yeah. I think it's not dissimilar to like when we're doing a convention. You get the lineup and you have so-and-so is going to be with so-and-so, and then a week before they phone up and they can't do it, so then they've got to go. So, and literally the fact this even exists is a bit of a miracle, because there are that many people who could do it, who couldn't do it, who were going to do it, who wanted to do it, and it changed so much. I slightly think, and let me go on a contrary point here, does the Five Doctors benefit? His cardboard thing it's overpowering his time scoop, isn't it?
It is this time, isn't it?
Very distracting.
I think he's got a special little button he's installed on his laptop there.
Has he stolen it off you, Jason?
He must have done, because I'm barely getting any airtime here.
Can of worms. I'm going to go on my contrary standpoint and say that, do we think actually in some ways the Five Doctors benefit from Tom Baker not being in it? Because would Tom have been too big a presence for it? And bear in mind, he was originally scripted to have the bigger chunk of it, so he would have had most of Peter Davison's stuff.
Yeah.
Would Tom have been too overpowering with everyone else?
Go on, Ben.
I think you're right. I think you're right. I think he probably would have been, because Tom was such a force, wasn't he? And the fact that he didn't want to come back because it was so close to his the 7 years that he'd done. So I think it probably would have taken over, and I think that alternate Five Doctors we may have got might not have been as good as this one that we did get. I mean, Five Doctors is as everyone's described it as, it's like comfort food, isn't it? It's really sort of it's something you can just put on. If you think, I just want to watch a random Doctor, you can stick that on, because it's something that you can just enjoy, and you know it really well. I have very fond memories of watching it when I would have been 10, and so that's like the right sort of age, I think, at that sort of time to watch Who. And I remember watching, because obviously at the time I was too young to have seen Three Doctors or anything like that. So to me, Richard Hurndall was the first Doctor. I don't know if I thought, who's this guy at the very beginning? I don't know who that's supposed to be. That's the sepia footage. But yeah, so for me, it's only when you go back and you watch it and you think, well, no. He's clearly Hartnell is Hartnell, and Richard Hurndall is doing, an impression of the First Doctor, which, he does, he does his best, doesn't he? Apart from his whistling dentures, but never mind. But otherwise, yeah, it's great. I think Pertwee and Troughton work really well together, and Davison's not actually in it as much as the rest, so in a way it sort of gives them more time to shine. Plus, obviously, they have to, go off on so many different tangents with so many different companions and Master and Cybermen and Daleks and all that sort of thing. So it's a lot to fit in 90 minutes and to sort of make it sort of work. And I think they do a good job at it. Even though a lot of people say that Peter Moffat generally is not regarded as a very good director. He's regarded as generally quite sort of ploddy and quite old school and like point the camera, move it, not very, this was obviously before Graham Harper and all that lot came along and made it all like that, bang flash. So yeah, in a way, in the circumstances, it's probably his best work, if that's saying something, but yeah, no, it works well.
A safe pair of hands, I think we would describe Peter Moffat as. I think. I mean, it's interesting you say, how would Tom have fitted into this? I think Troughton and Pertwee have a great dynamic, but I wonder how the dynamic would have worked if Tom had been on set with them, because they all like to gather some of their own limelight in their own ways. Particularly Pertwee, if I recall correctly, remembering watching some of the studio footage. And I do think there may have been a bit more fireworks on set had Tom been there, I think.
Yeah, because they tried to keep the Doctors apart because they were worried about the relationship between Pertwee and Troughton, because of the three Doctors. They felt that they didn't get on, but actually by that point they were really, really good friends, and they actually wanted more time together. I think you're right. I think Tom may have overpowered it, but the one slight little thing that I find is that the Pertwee and Sarah Jane doesn't work for me as well as if it had been Tom and Sarah Jane, or Pertwee and Katie as Jo. I think that partnership would have worked a little bit better. The way that the Tom Baker, the Fourth Doctor, and Sarah Jane relationship built was so much better than the Pertwee and Sarah Jane relationship, and I think there's a little bit, I'm not criticizing what we have got, but it would have been nice to see those two Doctors and their two companions again, where they had such strong relationships with them. Yeah. But for reasons that didn't happen.
Yeah, I agree, because I think it was supposed to be Troughton and Fraser Hines, wasn't it? And then they had to keep moving things around, and because also for the viewers it probably would have been quite confusing watching who'd grown up with like John Pertwee and then Tom Baker, and then suddenly see it revert back to him with Liz Sladen, and that's why she's like, what are you doing here? And it's a bit sort of like, oh, that's a bit weird. So I don't think they would have got Katie. I'm sure Katie at the time was thoroughly,
they offered to fly her back from Australia, didn't they?
Oh, did they really?
At one point, they said, we'll fly you back to film, but that was before they had to shift everything around again.
Yeah, because otherwise it would have been Caroline John maybe, but then the problem with her is that as much as I love Liz, I don't think it would have been one that the viewers would have gone, oh, great Liz, because unfortunately, because she only did the one season, I don't think, it would have been like, oh, that's one I would have automatically paired up with her, So yeah, you're right. They must have played that shifting round game all the time to work out, right, we'll put them with that. No, now they can't do it. No, this can't do it. So yeah, as Paul said, it's a miracle really that we got what we got with who we got. Do you know what I mean? So,
I know Watling was contracted to do it, contracted to do it, and then she got the Dave Allen show, which then didn't happen. So she said she got out of the contract to do it, to be paid for something else, which then didn't happen. So she was a bit miffed that in the end she could have done it. And residuals and all that. But I think the only person I can think of, 'cause I know some people said sort of maybe not, because I know Katie wasn't keen. I know they offered to fly. I think she wasn't keen on the going back thing at that point. I know a lot of her interviews sort of through the 80s and 90s were like, I loved it, but I keep going forward. I mean, she's still like that now. She's still a very keep going forward. So I think when she comes back, you know, Sarah Jane Adventures, she's not Joe Grant. She's, you know, Joe Jones, and it's a step on. It's not going back to being what you were. But I mean, Mr. Levine had a scripted part in this, and he was meant to be Ray Float, isn't he? He's meant to be the sergeant on the desk, and decided he decided it was not enough screen time and not enough money to participate in the Five Doctors.
Sorry, do we
Actually, in reality,
sorry, Ian Levine or John Levine?
John Levine. Right.
Okay, sure, just checking.
And actually, in the narrative that was set up in season 20, he's probably rushed off his feet on his second-hand forecourt with all his second-hand cars.
Selling his cars, yeah.
I mean, is it divergent universes? Are there different universes where Benton's a car salesman, where he's an ape primord? There's like a Benton multiverse out there that we're not privy to?
Oh no, hang on. There's a theme that you could pick up on here and run with if you really wanted to, if you were that way inclined.
I think it's a theme I want to drop pretty quickly.
Okay.
So pairings aside, I mean, I think what we get works. I think everyone's happily married up. What do we think works best about the Five Doctors?
I love the new console room and the new console. I was very taken with that when I watched it originally. The very first time I ever saw this back in the day. My copy of had the Children in Need numbers coming across the bottom of the screen constantly, and I wore my Scotch tape out. But no, for me, one of the first things I absolutely love about this is brand new console design, brand new console room. And it lifts the whole of the start of the story for me.
Stop the Matrix. This isn't the year where you've been to the YMCA playing snooker to raise money for Doctor Who. No,
that was 1990, not 83.
You were dressed like that in 1990?
Yes. It was Telethon 90.
Gosh. Oh. I suppose it takes longer for the fashions to get over the border to Wales.
I was very fashionable. I had hair back then as well.
1990?
I did, genuinely. Anyway, the TARDIS console. Back on track, the TARDIS console.
I think one of my... Sorry, Jace. James. I think one of my most favourite ones bit was Wrestling Warrior Robot. I know a lot of people say that, but for such a simple sort of costume and with effective editing and that sort of thing, I think it was really exciting and I think it worked really well. So I really love those scenes involving the robot.
And I like the fact that that was a late addition because they felt that there needed to be more peril for the third Doctor and Sarah Jane, because it was kind of like, yeah, they go up the mountain and that's it. So I think it's, for something that was last minute, it's probably one of the most memorable things in the show. That slaughter of Cybermen is the thing that people remember. I quite like the Dalek scene at the beginning because, again, JNT didn't want the Daleks in it. The Daleks had been rested by this point. They hadn't been in the show for 4 years and they wouldn't be back for another couple of years. And again, there was a bit of an argument about having them in it at all. So they get one slightly rapey looking Dalek to chase them down the corridor. It's very simplistic because it's basically the same corridor that they run down. But the explosion at the end, revealing the sort of innards of the Dalek, I remember as a child watching that and going, that was like quite scary when you were a younger kid, when the Dalek explodes. And I just think that was quite nicely done, although the outtakes for that are brilliant because they didn't tell the guy to stop. So he's still screeching and he's going down the corridor that goes, when do I stop? But again, something that was not necessarily in the original plan, but something that was included a little bit later on. But these little scenes, I think, make it. When you put them all together.
I don't want to contradict what you've said.
Oh, go on.
But the Daleks were meant to be in the last story of season 20, and then they turn up like 4 stories after. So I don't think he was too adverse to a bit of Dalek cray.
They hadn't been in there since
Destiny.
They hadn't been in there since Destiny. Yeah.
No, but the story that was meant to follow King's Demons was meant to be the return, which would have been what Resurrection becomes. So whether that's why he wasn't keen on it being in the Five Doctors because they were meant to be in the story that was, maybe that's where that is.
Possibly, yeah.
I don't know.
It wasn't in the original Five Doctors story. It was Eric that said you've got to get a Dalek in because it's one of the iconic.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite right that you should have a Dalek in there, I think, because it's the 20th anniversary story. It's a pretty ropey looking thing, though. God knows where they must have pulled it in from an exhibition or something, but it's really awful. The props in such a state. But I think it wouldn't have been right not to have. I mean, clearly the Daleks were due back for the 20th anniversary season, but great that they were included here, particularly alongside who you would think are the featured and special monsters of the, Daleks, Cybermen, Yeti. I mean, they're the ones that constantly, come to people's minds, aren't they?
I mean, the Yeti costume was the original, which was so sort of threadbare. They had to film most of it in the dark, so you just see a claw and a bit of fur. So there was still budget. I mean, the number of Cybermen that go through and blow up and things, you can see where the budget went and where the budget had to be as lean as possible, but at the same time trying to give the maximum effect. So, with the Yeti, because it's dark and you just see the claw and a bit of fur, everyone knows it's a Yeti. They say it's a Yeti as well. So it's kind of like, yeah, great, we've got the Yeti, we've got the Dalek. That is a bit ropey, but it's still the Dalek in there. And that whole scene at the beginning, when Susan says, oh, we're on Skaro, you could believe that it was, because the way the corridor is designed, you could believe that they were on Skaro. So again, you just had that whole sort of what's going on, where are they, how did they get there, that whole thing just sort of built up to the mystery. And I don't know about anyone else here, it felt that it was obviously going to be the Master, because it was like, oh, it's got the Master in it, so it's obviously going to be his scheme. But you spent time during the episode going, well, if it's not the Master, who is it? And I like that aspect of it as well.
And unfortunately, it turns out to be another renegade Time Lord. I mean, we've seen the Time Lords twice now in the space of a year, and they all seem pretty rotten at the core because they're all up to no good, trying to basically destroy themselves or go for global power.
And the thing is,
I think Dinah Sheridan gives a great line in wry disapproval throughout there, doesn't she? There's a very much for everything.
Oh yeah, she delivers it very, very well indeed as well.
But that was no. Sorry, I'll stop cutting Ben off and say, but that's another availability thing, isn't it? Because that's meant to be Elisabeth Grey. It's meant to link back. Arc of Infinity is meant to link quite directly to the Five Doctors, and it's a case of either unavailability or working on something else. So you'd have had the continuity of the two parts, and Colin Baker, was meant to be back, and but.
And I think it's a shame that they didn't carry the character over, though, because it is a different character as well, isn't it? So it's not because it's Thalia in Arc of Infinity and Flavia in the Five Doctors. So it is a shame that it isn't obviously changed because they couldn't get that casting, as you say, to have that continuity coming through.
Could be the same Maxwell though, because he's just called Commander, isn't he? Could be Commander Maxwell.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that have been quite superb though to have had Colin in there as Commander Maxwell, and you actually genuinely almost have got a Six Doctors story.
Wasn't he on the Radio Times special? They'd announced him by this point, hadn't they? Yeah. He's on the cover of the special.
He was in the special, yeah. So they had announced him, so yeah.
Because Peter announced he was leaving long before, sort of after season 20, but before the the special. So he'd announced it, and they had, I thought, announced Colin Baker before the 5 Doctors had shown.
Because Ben's taking a drink now and he won't be able to speak, and we're like, what were you going to say before?
Okay, right. Back to me. Here we are. Right. I was going to say that it's interesting that we have a 4th Barusa. It's like every time the Doctor meets Barusa, he regenerates, and it happens a lot more than we get anyone else. So I don't know whether that's just because every time they had a different story, they thought, well, let's get Barusa back, that the previous actor was not available, or whether they just thought, let's just keep regenerating him over and over. So I don't know.
Which prompts my question. All right. Why was he after immortality when they can offer the Master another set of regenerations?
Are they telling the truth?
Could be lying.
Does he want immortality for that incarnation?
Possibly.
Is it that regeneration would go on forever rather than Barusa would go on forever and ever?
It just seems like a really weird plot point that they get the Master and go, we can offer you a brand new set of regenerations.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the same time, he's like, well, I'm after immortality. Never mind that. It's a bit odd.
He's sick of picking dry old men to regenerate into. He's like, not another. What shall I go for this time? Curly hair? No, I think I'll be a dry old man. That's what I'll be. Fix it up.
That's why we see a different one every time. It just regenerates into an older man each time.
Yeah. And he gets older and older. And drier and drier.
I also I love that slightly camp thing that you get. I mean, you get it in a lot of sort of action genres, where the villain has a sort of an outfit they change into for their final reveal of being a bit of a megalomaniac. So he doesn't do all his time scooping and stuff in his regular gear. He gets into his little black thing with his coronet, doesn't he? That's his bad boy gear, that is, and I think that's quite funny.
Do we think that Philip Lethen is the best Barusa out of all of them? Or not?
Yes, I do, actually.
Yeah.
The Barusa in Arc of Infinity, it's not exactly a huge part either, is it, particularly?
Right.
But they're again, I wonder if the general viewing public were going to ever notice that we had the recurring character of Barusa. I suppose the fans would. But no, a favourite one for me is the one in the 5 Doctors.
I think he is the best. The Arc of Infinity one was a bit doddery, wasn't he? I think he actually mucked up some of his lines as well while he's trying to deliver them. So he's clearly doesn't know where he is. They probably just wheeled him off back to the care home. So
he's quite supercilious in The Deadly Assassin, isn't he? I think that's a good performance.
Yeah.
It's the same dry old man in, well, it's not the same dry old man, but it's the same dry performance, isn't it, in Invasion of Time? And he did that performance in every show he did, didn't he? And kudos to him for that.
Oh, John Arnott, yeah. He's quite. He reminds me of some sort of a bird, like an old buzzard,
You do get that lovely scene where he's having his drink, don't you? He's quite good on the comedy front, I think, in Invasion of Time. He does a few good lines.
Yeah,
I'm going to pick the Invasion of Time incarnation as the best one.
Oh, contrary again.
If you agree with me, because I'm handsome, put it in the comments below.
Whereas I think the Deadly Assassin one is quite bitchy, really, isn't he? He's quite
snide to the Doctor at the end, isn't he?
Yeah, he's a waspish old queen, isn't he? I think that's what we call him.
There you go. That's what you're looking.
He's like, is it like 9 out of 10 or 8 out of 10? He goes
9 out of 10.
9 out of 10. Now go.
It's not such a good end for the character of the Castellan either, is it?
Not the mind probe.
Exactly.
And also, having mentioned that Leela's knocking around Gallifrey in the Arc of Infinity, still can't be asked to go and say hello, can she?
Yeah. Presumably Louise wasn't available for filming either then.
Yeah,
No.
there's been a not at this moment. They could have sent a message from K9.
Yeah, exactly. But that's the thing. If Louise had been in it, would we have seen Leela in one of those like Time Lord hats then coming in? Because you'd think by then she would have evolved and not been the Savage anymore. So would she be in this sort of like regal sort of thing with the Time Lord hat and the robes and the
She'd
collar?
have the dagger of Rassilon.
Yeah, she'd be running the franchise round the back that sells all the Rassilon merch.
Or should Flavia have had a little leather number and gone, I've been influenced by your friend Leela. Do you like my mini? Yeah, Gallifrey's stuck to the sort of Dallas vibe, hasn't it? It's got I love the little fountain in the corridor.
Yeah,
It's like a garden centre, doesn't it? It with a bit of furniture and some plants and a little fountain.
It does. Whereas the Arc of Infinity Gallifrey was more like a hair salon, wasn't it? It's like, that's a strange sort of decor that they have.
And yet they wouldn't have hair because they've all got horrible skull caps, haven't they? No, Flavia's got a lovely curl, hasn't she? But the majority of them have got the unforgiving skull cap, haven't they?
Indeed.
That's probably available in the Rassilon merch shop as well, probably. Because you've got the ring of Rassilon, you've got the coronet of Rassilon, you've got the seal of Rassilon, you've had the rod of Rassilon before now. I mean, it's just ridiculous, isn't it?
The sash.
And the sash as well. I forgot the sash. Yes, I'm glad you mentioned that.
That's branding, that is. He might be like long dead and legendary, but he's branded.
Yeah, he's okay. He's just lying back and soaking up his profits, isn't he, old Rassilon?
And waiting to lure one Time Lord every so many generations to sort of join his little art, his living art display.
Yeah.
Is that what we're going to call it? Which actually is one of the creepiest things, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
About the whole.
I'm alive.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. When they sort of end up at the end and all you see is the eyes going like that all the time.
And they're a bit bloodshot as well, aren't they? Because they've always been stuck under there for a few hours in the light, and their eyes have gone a bit.
Exactly.
I think that's probably the only genuine sort of scare in this, though, isn't it? I don't know, because I don't. When I was a kid, I didn't remember being scared of it. But I think that's the only thing I found creepy about it. The robot. The funny thing, because we talked earlier about the Rassilon Warrior robot. I haven't even had as much to drink as Jason. The Rassilon Warrior robot. The funny thing with the special edition is it does rectify the fact that the Cybermen do all stand there and just stare a bit simplistically, because they fire back in the special edition. Back fans.
But to no avail.
No avail. Can't beat a man in a silver jumpsuit, can you?
Nope.
All dressed up as a time vortex.
Me, yes.
Yeah, that's cosplay today then, the time vortex.
That is the cosplay. Look, I have come as my own time-scooped person. The original, you may say. This is before the special effects.
It's kind of a halfway house between the faces on Rassilon's tomb and the time scoop, because nobody gets scooped that close up.
Oh, dear.
The other thing I think I'm slightly sad that we're missing is weren't we meant to have Autons as well with Susan when she was scooped?
Yeah, there was. Yeah, supposed to be a whole fight scene, wasn't there, with Autons in the.
I mean, it would have made no sense, but it would have been nice to see.
Yeah, it would have been a good inclusion, I think. I mean, obviously, budget was playing its part, but I think, Autons are well remembered. If it's good enough to open up the brand new series in 2005, then it's good enough for the 5 Doctors, in my opinion.
So we're now, just this week, 17 years into the new Doctor Who. So do you think there should be another 5 Doctors in 3 years' time for the 20th anniversary of New Who, if you like? Would that work?
I was thinking about this multi-Doctor thing earlier when I was watching Doctor Who and the 5 Doctors. when the 3 Doctors came around, it was the first time. It was amazing. 5 Doctors came around again. 2 Doctors, it's it's your third shot at it, but it's still quite unusual within the sort of original 26-year run. Dimensions in Time comes and becomes the best Doctor Who story of all time, unsurpassed. But since then, I slightly think, because of the way the show is consumed by fandom and how the likes of a Big Finish have now done the 4th Doctor with the 10th Doctor, the 6th Doctor with the whole concept of a multi-Doctor thing. I was thinking, when you watch the 5 Doctors the first time, you think, this is really unusual. It only happens to the direst of things that they have to meet each other. Whereas, because there have been so many kind of in comics, and not just Big Finish comics and all that stuff, there have been so many kind of multi-doctored stories since that it feels slightly like, Day of the Doctor. I mean, in the actual new series, you have 2.5 Doctors. There's been so many kind of hacks back at multi-Doctor. I don't know if it feels special now. It feels a bit kind of like, yeah.
I think I agree with you. It was great to have a multi-Doctor story in the new format, but for me, it doesn't have the same nostalgia, I think, as the multi-Doctor stories back in the day had. You think about it, we had 2 Doctors that had virtually been on screen literally within, a few years of each other when we had it in the modern series. But I think the format doesn't lend itself as well. It doesn't need, it almost doesn't need the crutch of having all these extra Doctors come back. I mean, the rumors are rife that the Centennial special that we're going to have now coming up is going to have, some multiple Doctors in there potentially. But, that aside, for me, back in the day in the classic era, I think it served itself and it had a place, because we weren't able to consume old Doctor Who in the way that we necessarily consume the new series.
Yeah, it's very true, very true. I don't think it would, as you say, they are going to do something soon anyway for the anniversary, but it does not, you're right, it just doesn't have that nostalgia feel anymore, does it? The most nostalgic thing about Day of the Doctor was having Tom appear at the end. That was the nostalgia bit of that. Whereas, as you say, we'd already had, David very recently, so but yeah, I think now, because Big Finish and comics and everything like that have had all this stuff, and now it just seems like back then it was special to have it, wasn't it? Whereas now it's just like, oh, okay, yeah, another multiverse, this, that, and the other, in different formats. So yeah, it's not sort of special anymore, is it? And it's very difficult to do that now, or even to surprise people with it now. Because I mean, you look at the digital age and social media, everything like that now. Even if they did, I mean, already stuff is, I haven't read anything, but already stuff has leaked out about the special. So and then people are probably going to then put something out about that as well. So again, it's just not really special anymore. Gone are the days of like, oh my God, Cybermen in Earthshock and those sort of things. You know what I mean? So
I mean, I used to go on an annual trip to the exhibition in Blackpool. I mean, Blackpool or Longleat, one of the two. And, that was the only link you had to the past Doctors and the past monsters at that stage, because we didn't have necessarily home video in kind of the way that we have now, or it was just becoming a thing, perhaps an age thing with me. But so to get a multi-Doctor story, like the 3 Doctors, the 5 Doctors, 2 Doctors, they all have their own charm and they all have their own place. Potentially the 2 Doctors, it could be argued, came too soon after the 5 Doctors. But now, as I said, everything's at your fingertips. And I think, obviously the 2 Doctors that played together in Day of the Doctor had literally just been back to back with one another almost. So it necessarily didn't work as well.
Although having said that, I mean, I could just be being a mardy old bag as far as if you were 10 years old, I don't know, when you were watching Chris Eccleston, and now you're nearly 30 and you go, I'd like the nostalgia of seeing the 9th Doctor and Rose, the 10th Doctor, and whichever of the leftover, it's kind of, if you had that kind of run with them, would that be something where you're like, oh, that's quite I think the problem right now is, I think because the show's in a bit of a strange place, I just don't, and everyone's really excited about the next special being Sea Devils, and it being Sea Devils, and the Sea Devils looking like they did in 1972. it's this kind of tug of retrospectiveness on it that I think sort of retarding it. And I think it doesn't feel like it's punching forward. And the 60th is a slight problem, I think, for me, in that the series should be firing itself into new arenas. And there's this sort of feeling that it's the 60th, you need to, have Susan back, and you need to have the Fourth Doctor, and you need to have, and it's kind of like, you've got to have all of this stuff, but it is just nostalgia. It's sort of just comfort food, whereas it needs to be on a good diet. Yeah.
I think if they were able to get Eccleston back, for example, which I highly, feel it's highly unlikely, that would be a big thing. I think, if they could get something like that. But I think you're right in the fact that by the time we get to the 60th, it wouldn't be so good to dwell as much on the past because of the situation that the show's in at the moment. It really should be, we're launching a new Doctor, a new era, a new production, company behind it. I don't imagine it's going to be like the Five Doctors in the match, so much nostalgia element, but it would be, I'd be quite open to a series of specials with previous Doctors where they don't meet, but there's some part of a wider plot, for example. But again, that's the kind of thing that Big Finish do is so they'll have a Doctor in a story, then another Doctor, then another Doctor, and then they'll have a fourth story that sort of brings them all together for some conclusion. But I think we should be, accepting the past, but really now saying, okay, well, this is what the vision of the show is going forward, particularly as we're kind of coming to that complete change in the show. And Russell T Davies didn't, you're right, he brought the Autons back for the first episode, but he progressed the show, even though he did, he didn't bring things back really quickly. He waited. He concentrated more on the dynamics of the two main characters and the setup of the show before sort of like saying, right, here's a Cyberman, here's a Dalek, here's all this. You didn't get that all straight away, which I think it benefited from. So, yeah.
I think just on that, bringing it back to the Doctor and the Five Doctors, I think one of the great things about the Five Doctors is actually, although it's a huge nostalgia fest and there's lots of characters and things from the past, you can actually get through watching the Five Doctors without knowing who everyone is. There isn't a prerequisite to... I mean, some of that comes down to, I guess, the fact that Terence was getting a phone call saying, you got no Joe, you got Sarah Jane, and all that sort of stuff, that you have to slightly loosely script around some of this to interchange things. But I know when I watched it the first time, would have been on video, VHS, I hadn't seen all of the people in it, so I hadn't done a Susan and First Doctor and all that. So I wasn't familiar with everyone when they came back, but I understood the principles of who they would be within the situation. Makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, anyone pre Tom Baker for me, apart from anyone that would have turned up in the Five Faces season in '81, it all would have been completely new to me to a degree, apart from anything I might just have read in sort of in sort of books or magazines or as such, because yes, the Celebration book would have come out by then, and I would have read about all these companions. I'd have read about Liz and I'd have read about Unit, but I wouldn't necessarily, I'd seen one Unit story essentially in the Three Doctors at that point. I hadn't seen any stories with Liz in, so I didn't know, potentially like you, a lot of those companions, and had no previous experience of them.
Hang on, have you gone into sort of like the two Brigadiers? Has your mind been wiped of all the classic ones you watched when you were a kid? Is it just start from the Three Doctors?
If you recall, my very first memory of Doctor Who isn't actually as early as you all say it is.
He remembers that hot day at Television Centre when they had to remount the pilot.
For the avoidance of doubt for our viewer, it was Planet of the Spiders episode 3 was my very first memory of Doctor Who.
But it doesn't mean he wasn't watching it for the 10 years previously. It just means he'd been drinking too much. So we sort of talked actually during 20, because JT had a sort of reticence to using people writing-wise and directing-wise who've been on Old School. I think you can't go wrong with Terence in terms. Terence does an amazing job with this. I mean, it's not high art. I'm not going on the record saying that this is a high art production, but he knows the structure of the story. He knows what he's got to do, and he knows how to get it in there and get it done. Because I know director-wise, they looked at Warris because it would have been first and then 20th, and obviously Warris looked and thought, yeah, it's been nice. It's been nice having the coffee, and I'll see you later, John. And Doug Camfield didn't want to do it because John had pissed him off by not asking him back previously, because he said, I'd like to do more, and you've gone, oh no, don't use the old directors, darling. So I don't know entirely what I was making the point on. That.
I don't think it's a bad script from Terence. You know, you are right. You're in very safe territory. I mean, if you think about the amount of novels he'd written at that stage, he knew what there was. He knew what there was about the series. He understood the series. He'd been writing for Target for 10 years at that point. He'd been writing stories. He was script editor. He'd been quite deep in the ethos of Doctor Who back in the day. So I think to have Terence write, it's quite a special thing.
It is a shame that he didn't get to do more in some ways. I mean, having just trawled through season 20, I think you don't have that sort of division between reliable people who've done a few and new and experimental who are learning the way forward. And I think that's something that sort of quite hits in the 80s. Is the ethos in the 70s and the 60s is that if you had a hit, you came back, however many serials on, and you kept doing that till you fell out with the production office. It kind of, that's how it rolled. You'd have a Bob and Dave every year because they knew what to do, and that's how it worked. Whereas I don't think you quite get that consistency to some degree with the 80s. So it's a shame that having made the Five Doctors work, and he does an incredible job making the Five Doctors work, is that they didn't go, oh, well, maybe we should see if he wants to do one next year or one in. It just seems a bit strange that they never went there.
So is that it for Terence then? Did he not?
That's it for Terence.
Wow. So well, at least he went out on a high, I suppose.
And I mean, the last one would have been State of Decay, which would have been which was a leftover from season 15, isn't it? Because they didn't want to have the vampire thing, so that was knocking around and plugged a gap. So he hadn't really been asked to properly do one, I suppose, since State of Decay was meant to be the vampire mutations and Horror of Fang Rock. So it's been a long time since you actually asked to do specifically something new.
Yeah, because J&T suddenly wanted to try a lot of new writers, but that doesn't always work if they're not used to how difficult Doctor Who is really to write for. I mean, you can see how many scripts were sent in and then rejected, and the fact that they were really struggling at that point. I think especially from season 20 at the beginning, that I think they were really struggling to get stuff done in time and get workable scripts. And if you're pushed up until that point and you've got nothing else, you're just going to have to go with what you've got and make the best of it. And I think that's probably why a lot of the stories probably suffered.
Yeah, there's some very confusing stories in season 20, and you can see where they were trying to go, but they just don't cross that line in the end, and some completely fall apart when you start dissecting them, because they really are. I mean, we had this conversation of who's to blame for some of the things that happened, because it really is a sorry state in some of those stories.
But as I think I said I may have said a couple of times during our season 20 recordings, ultimately that comes down to however strong your script editor is and however strong the producers are at that point, because they're the ones that ultimately take those scripts on board and try and work with them. So if you're taking scripts in that aren't aren't the best and you're trying to make the best out of them, there's only so much you can do when you're in production on a bad script. Whereas actually even some of the, the best scripts are often the ones that don't have to rely so heavily on the production because the script is so strong, it works so well.
So on Doctor Who and the Five Doctors, because I kind of love most of it, what is your key iconic moment in the Five Doctors? I've thrown them all into silence.
James was just getting taken away by the time thing again, capsule thing.
For me, hang on, there you go. See, I am being taken away there, floating away. I think it is the Raston Warrior. I think specifically it's when the Cyberman throws up for some reason.
The Cyber Milk.
It's just a really gruesome addition to that slaughter. It's just the Cybermen just doubled over throwing up. It's just, didn't need to be there, but somehow it's there and it's the thing you remember. That'd be mine.
They're still thinking. I mean, I'm slightly torn. I think it's either Hurndall cramming that fruit into his mouth and it all dribbling everywhere. I don't think I've ever seen it so unusual in my life. There's an outtake where he's just covered in juice. I don't know what was the director's note there. You wolf that fruit. And Mark's behind him sort of doing there's that, or I honestly, I mean, God, I think Elisabeth is probably one of my favourite things about Doctor Who highly, but she manages to pull off falling down the incline that isn't that. I mean, she does that with aplomb, and I think kudos to her that she didn't just say, do you know what, Pete, I don't think this is working, darling. Can we get something that looks like a cliff rather than a stumble? And then sort of hoisting me up on Bessie, which again, it's not like she's dangling from a cliff and it's helping her. It sort of just drags her along the ground. And I think it's amazing that she keeps her dignity with that. And also, there's a bit on the extended version, which you don't get on the regular, where she goes, Cybermen, and then she sort of throws a rock and goes, missed. And I'm so pleased they took it out now, because it's like, was she hoping to take out the whole load of the Cybermen coming up the hill with one boulder, just knock them down one by one? I mean,
and wasn't her falling down the hillside? Wasn't that one of the original cliffhangers when it was actually re-edited into a 4-part story?
Yeah, John Boat goes, now what? It's sort of cliffhanger time.
She ditches the raincoat though, doesn't she, quite quickly? It's not in the later scenes. It's just like, no, done with that.
She was wise to take it though, because strangely, the death zone on Gallifrey does look like a wet hill in Wales.
It does, in the middle of autumn.
It looks a little bit like the Eye of Orion as well.
So it's the most tranquil place in the world, but it looks a bit dingy.
But I will just do a shout out for the music in this, because the way that they make that sort of little corner in North Wales feel like it's some tranquil place with the music. It's Peter Howell, isn't it? I think it is beautiful music for that bit. And then when you get to the death zone and you've got that, like that, that really sort of harsh
Rassilon's horn.
Rassilon's horn.
No, that's the cow of Rassilon. That's what that is.
The milky of Rassilon. He also does a very clever thing, doesn't he, of taking the old theme tune and mixing it into the new theme. That's quite nice.
That's good.
And I think in answer to your question, P-Bal, mine would be the bit where the Brigadier goes and leans in by the wall, but has to watch where he's leaning and actually has to make sure he hits his mark there, ready for the Cyberman to come through and grab his arm. But it's all very clang, clang, clang. And I remember being impressed with the clangs back in the day, but it's awfully bad acting when you've got to look where you're falling. I better just lean on this bit of wall here.
But we do wonder, what's the Cyberman doing? What's he doing? It's sort of like a cyber glory hole. I don't know why he's reaching his arm randomly through. I don't understand.
I didn't think you were going to go there.
It's like he's crouching for a cyber shit, isn't he?
Oh no, we might have our very first X-rated here.
Oh
No, he had to take it lower. And I went low, he went lower.
He went low.
We do. It is a good question though. What was the Simon doing? Lay on his, because it's not like it's a build. I mean, it's just a bit of a wall.
yeah.
Exactly.
It's lovely. It's atmospheric and it's nice.
We're picking holes here in what is a great production.
Yes.
I mean, we must be thankful that they sent lots of Cybermen to the Death Zone so that they could march around the hillsides, but only one Dalek onto the very smooth studio floor, none outside.
They'd learnt their lesson by this stage.
Yeah, I think for me, I agree with James. I think that's the whole cyber massacre thing is a definite high point for me. And as for funny bits, because we've all gone there, it has to be Susan tripping over that bit of. It's just a little plant out of the grass, and it's just like, and then suddenly she's like, ooh, like that, and can't walk, and it's like, oh, for God's sake,
Or it's the bit where she sits Hurndall down and goes, "I'll go and scout." Takes one step and goes, "Look, the TARDIS."
Oh, yeah, I know, exactly.
It's complete flat terrain. It's like.
But I also find it extremely unusual that he doesn't inquire after how her life on Earth has gone since he dumped her there many days ago.
He locks her out. He's obviously really pissed off that she's back. And he's got to just front it out a little bit and just play it cool. Like, oh God, I've been time scooped. I was just having a sniff around the garden, and now I locked her out and she's back. I better get saddled with her again. I've moved on. I've got Katerina waiting in the TARDIS now. I've moved on from this.
It's like the way that Peter Davison looks at her as well.
When this is Susan, he goes, I know.
For those people watching since Dalek Invasion of Earth, they'll be wondering, where is David Campbell? Has she bumped him off?
He's locked her out. That's why she was wandering the streets to get time scooped. He locked the door. He's like, don't try getting in, Susan. I put the bolt on.
Or do you think she's divorced him and gone with someone else then?
Quite possible.
The
TARDIS also has the Gallifrey and wicker furniture, doesn't it? I like that. And twirly straws. The twirly straws.
Oh, left over by the White Guardian.
That's right. They are left over by the White Guardian.
Oh dear.
I don't know if it's great that we're admiring all the campery of it. It is quite camp.
But it's just on the right side of it. It doesn't step over the OTT line. I think it plays it perfectly.
After having watched this back again, and obviously we watched it and reviewed it a year ago now at Utopia, and going back and watching it again, so close to having watched season 2, and obviously we've done that review just recently. It's interesting to sit back and look again at Hurndall's interpretation, I think, of the First Doctor as well during this. And I think I said back at the first time we reviewed this that I thought it was a pretty good interpretation of it. But actually, looking at it now, having done 42 weeks of Hartnell just recently, there isn't a great similarity here, is there, in all honesty, other than a wig?
There's a few mannerisms, but he's a lot taller, and especially when you see him standing next to Carole Ann, you can see the difference. Do you know what? I think because he's not necessarily doing an impersonation of him, I think it for me it's okay. I think if you'd gone from watching season 2 to this, you'd be like, what on earth? But bearing in mind that Hartnell had only played a minor part in the Three Doctors, had basically just appeared on a TV screen, some people that were watching this wouldn't necessarily have that, direct comparison. Some might, because they've grown up watching the show and they're looking at someone play a character that they loved. But I think it's right to have him included in a form. I think it's sad that he died shortly after it was broadcast. So, yeah. But I think that's something now that we kind of have got used to in a way. You know, we've had David Bradley come on board. There's a new voice for Hartnell in the audio series. You know, yeah, yeah. Anyway, but you know, I think we're used to the show continuing in a different way now. Maybe not so much then.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't watching for it, obviously, back in when I watched it originally when it first aired. It's just an interesting comparison now, having just done the rewatch for me.
Yeah.
I also think it's a sort of testimony to how good William Hartnell is, that actually Hurndall and Bradley both misfire so badly by getting it so wrong as to what he was doing. It's almost like you've seen a photo of William Hartnell and gone, oh, crotchety old man, he'd obviously be doing it. And the portrayal, William Hartnell isn't an old man in it. He's a very sprightly, quite forceful character. So all this kind of doddery, it just isn't. It doesn't bear relation to anything you see the sort of First Doctor doing. It just isn't a thing. And it's almost like the Hurndall has seen like a photo and a clip of Hartnell and gone, right, okay, well, I'll do my own thing and it's going to be this. And then Bradley's seen Hurndall and it's kind of like a Russian doll scenario that nobody's gone back to actually what's quite a humorous and quite a striking performance from Hartnell. And I think it's a strange thing, because if your impression of the First Doctor were Hurndall or Bradley, you'd be completely off on the wrong track as to what the First Doctor's all about.
I agree with that. And I think at times Hurndall's interpretation comes across, and it's almost like a bitterness or a nastiness, actually, as he tells off on some of his sentences. And I don't know if he's trying again to capture an essence here, but he's so far off the mark, actually, of what the essence of Hartnell actually was.
He's
he's vile to Tegan, isn't he?
Yeah, he is, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, well, if you must, you know, he's, you know, but then he does his easy as pie thing where he just walks across the chessboard in no. He just strolls across.
Yeah, I know. That whole bit, it does not make sense. I want someone to explain to me exactly how that works. How he does the coin and then says pie and goes across, and then she has to do it a different way. It's like
it's because they ran out of time and he just forgot about it and walked straight across, so they had to just keep filming. And you've got Anthony Ainley sort of like jumping from you know, square to square, going, oh, you know, try it, Doctor, and he just walks across. He's just like, yeah, what's the problem? Yeah. And then gets Tegan to do the pattern.
It did teach a generation of children pi, didn't it? Ratio this comes to right diameter of yeah.
Yes, very true, very true.
So I think children. Oh, actually, no. Stop the Matrix. Do we have any facts from James?
You know what? No, I'm not going, because this started a whole thing before.
No, I think you should now re-mention the Quarks again one more time for us. Come on.
So the Quarks were supposed to be in this one.
Just
for old times.
No,
we want that. That's the kind of dark web stuff we want. The Quarks were originally in this.
Do you know what? I will just say, I watched this a couple of nights ago in preparation for this, and then while I was reading about the special edition, because I went for our review previously, I watched the new version, and for this one I went back to the original one, hence the black cutout, because I just thought, you know, I always watch the new version. I'll go back and watch the old version because there are some slight differences to it. But what I did discover is the David Tennant audio commentary, which is an Easter egg on the first one.
Yeah,
where when he sat there getting drunk watching it with Phil Collinson.
With Phil Collinson, yeah, it's quite good. Like a sort of a fan commentary, but with David.
Yeah, and it just I ended up watching it again because I was like, oh, where is this? Because I the other two will know that I don't do commentaries very often at all, and I don't do anything that's you know, pictures.
Don't do a recon either, do you?
I don't do reconstruction. But I must admit, I did end up watching it again last night. You know, and but that's what it's like. I don't mind because I only watched it a couple of days beforehand. But
I thought you were about. I thought you were about to say you rewatched The Dominators as well alongside it, just so you could get your fix on a Quark.
No. There's plenty of time for the Quarks to come back for the 60th. It's all right. It's plenty. They'll be back.
I would say that the first time I ever watched Five Doctors, then when I watched the was it the special edition, or no, it probably was a special edition. Then when it came out on DVD, and then they had the one that wasn't the special edition, but the regular Five Doctors, that, you know, the UK transmitted one. And I remember thinking, hang on, some of these scenes go on a bit longer. And so I think the one that they transmitted in Australia, or it was either that, or it was the one that they first released on VHS, had little edits. And I think it was maybe to make it 90 minutes exactly to fit it in the time slot, because I noticed that version has not actually been released, and that's the version I actually remember. So it's so funny when I watch it and I'm thinking, hang on, the scene doesn't cut here, it keeps going, and that cuts different, that cuts different. So because I've always got that old version still in my mind's eye.
Oh, you were a little bit Hurndall then. You were channeling Hurndall.
He was channeling Mary Whitehouse, you mad old bat.
I'm glad someone got the reference.
Yeah.
Thank you. Jason's not really a big Doctor Who fan, so he wouldn't pick up on that sort of thing.
No, I wouldn't. No, I've never watched the series ever.
If I was doing Hurndall, I would be doing Susan. Surely it's Susan.
Or Liza Minnelli.
Or just dribbling while eating food.
Exactly. And snapping.
We should have all brought some exotic fruit onto Wolf and see who can make the most mess. So, important time now. We're going to do. I'm going to do a little bit of Carole Vorderman here with the scoring. So, what are our scores for Doctor Who and the Five Doctors? I even double checked what you 12 Marys gave it when we were last time out scoring.
Okay, well, this will be really interesting then, won't it? Because there's a difference in my score actually between that and now.
Do you want to tell us it, or have we got a guess?
No, okay, I will go ahead then. I will go ahead. I will go ahead and do my score. So to lose is to win, and he who wins shall lose. Just to get that phrase in, because I love that phrase, and I just hadn't got it in through the course of this. Okay, listen, this was great to go back and revisit this. I didn't watch any fancy special editions. I watched it, the original version that went out, minus the Children in Need things that come across the bottom. And do you know what? It struck me, having watched season 20, how much of a lift this was. And although there was several months gap in television terms, this was a much needed boost in the arm for, I think, the Davison era. It's a proper celebration of 20 years of Doctor Who. And you know what? I think they did it really, really well. They brought a nice mix of characters back. And okay, they didn't necessarily mix the right companions with the right doctors, but hey, they had some problems. But it was good enough for 13-year-old me, and it was good enough for the me that watched it this week. So in difference to my score that I scored it at Utopia, I am going for a very nostalgic 9 for the Five Doctors.
He's done his traditional thing of seeing what we scored it, then adding 1 point on.
That's what he does every time.
But I'm the first to score, so I don't know.
But you know what was scored last time.
You just
I didn't go back. See, I didn't go
score.
back and revisit the video, so I remember what I scored it. I don't necessarily remember what you scored it.
But you've added 1 on to what you scored.
Indeed, because I think it's a nostalgic 9 now. That's season 20 that's done that to me. It's put a 9 on it. You see, but what extra? You know,
Very Hurndall, isn't it?
You know, there's no rhyme, no reason behind my scoring methods. So,
James.
Yes. So, do you know, I have to agree with part of what Jason just said, which is having watched season 20 and then having watched this is like, I don't know, it's like a complete breath of fresh air from what was quite torrid to get through. To get to this is like, oh, this is fantastic. This is like a hot bath after a really long day where you're just like, I just want to unwind and chill out. And I when we did our previous review, I did say that I loved this. However, I think I have now got an even greater impression of it because of what came before, and how, reading more about it, how it could have been. Fair enough, you know, would have liked to see those combinations, but actually what we get, I think you're right in your comments earlier on, you know, it's put together really well and it works. So, because Jason has gone first and because I want him to look like the stingy Mary, I'm giving it 10.
Hey!
I don't know if he looks stingy or a little bit stroppy right now.
No, I'm fine, because I think I'm very comfortable with the 9 I've given it.
The nostalgic 9.
A nostalgic 9.
Nostalgic 9.
So bad. What
Yes.
would you give Doctor Who and the Five Doctors?
I would give it a 9.
Well,
Ben,
we're never used to that level of speed.
Don't be messing about with me. I'm not doing all this build-up and stuff. I haven't watched season 20 like you guys. The other two said the same sort of stuff that I was going to say: nostalgia, childhood memories, da da da. So sweet and to the point. There you go.
I love it.
Wow. I mean, that was dimensions in time to Jason's Dalek Master Plan, wasn't it? Yes, I haven't changed my score from last time. I think it's unashamedly nostalgic, and I still love it, and I still give it 10. Which means, right?
Wow. Go on.
Oh, stop the front page here. I have done some mathematics. Ratio of this, no, I have done some mathematics here, and our highest scored Doctor Who story of season 20 was Enlightenment, which I think fell on 19. It didn't hit the 20 mark, did it? So I think it was 19.
I think it was 19 or 19 and a half. I can't remember.
So if I seasonally adjust the scores from all 4 of us, to take into account that it would have been 3 of us, but then, yeah.
Are you applying pie here as well when you get a chance?
I'm applying a little bit of pucker pie. And it would bring the Doctor Who and the Five Doctors out on 28 and a half.
Yay! Our winner!
Very good. Very nice.
I think that's more than like 3 season 20 stories combined.
This is better than 3 season 20 stories combined.
So season 20 has seen our lowest scoring story, but technically our highest scoring story, because we've never had 4 people giving scores before.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's like Eurovision though, and it's like, oh well, that's had 670 points. Like, well, they only used to give a maximum of 20 in the early days, so you can't have that. Not having that. Right. Well, James is off for his 7th SEAL reunion. He'll be linking arms across the cliff face. So thank you very much, gentlemen.
A pleasure as always.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
There we go, Ben. I thought I'd let you get in after Jason, otherwise you might not get it back. So yes, thank you very much.
I could pinch it straight back though from you, James.
Yeah, I know you can.
No, he's good at pinching.
Rude.
Oh,
Rude.
oh, oh, oh,
Rude.
oh. Macra.
Oh, we're not back to Jason's crabs, are we?
Oh no, let's wrap this up.
Oh, right. If you're still watching, thank you very much. It's been lovely to have you join us. Join us again, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye. Jason's crabs indeed.
Oh my Christ, what a way to end this.